Welcome to the New Money Habits Podcast, where we talk about how to create a better plan for your money so you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. Here are your hosts, Sarah Jones and Nino Villa.
Welcome back, Budgeteers. Coach Nino Villa here, and my partner on the airwaves, Sarah Jones, checking in from, you're still in South Carolina, right?
I am still here. Feels like it's been a long time. It feels like we've been here a long time.
I feel like you've been there a long time, but obviously it's kind of grown on you. I know that you've spoken fondly of your time there, so you guys are enjoying it. That's awesome.
We are. I'll be honest. The only thing, and I think just being in the South, something that I didn't anticipate, because I've never spent a ton of time in the South, is how much rain. The amount of rain that the South receives is mind-blowing, and it's every day. And I'm looking forward to getting, into the middle of the United States, where maybe they don't get as much rain for just give me a month of no rain. That's my only complaint that I've had lately is
okay. So I've traveled to Florida a time or two, more for business than for pleasure. But one of the things I noticed anytime I spend time down that far south is it seems to only rain for maybe 10 minutes or so, though. It doesn't seem to be this ongoing thing. Is it similar in South Carolina, or are we talking all-day rain events?
It feels like all-day rain events.
Okay.
Because, we've spent some time in Florida, too, and it was so, it always was so interesting because sunny, 86, 89, 90 degrees, and then 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes a 10, 15-minute rainstorm that comes through just to not even cool things up. It feels like it kind of freshens it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then the rain's gone and the sun's back out and it's beautiful and humid and all of that. And in every place that we've been in the South, it's just pour. Let's just have complete downpour for what feels like hours, and gloomy, and it's kind of drizzled for most of the day here today. So yeah, I want to look out and see sunshine, and I look out and I see cloudy skies. So
well, it's only, a balmy 102 degrees here in Phoenix, and the sun is certainly shining, so you're always welcome to come back.
We will be there very soon, and it was so funny, if I may, I was on a call this morning with some other colleagues from around the world, and they were asking me where I was, and we were talking about it, and I told them that we were going to winter in Arizona, and one of them, he says, "Winter?" He goes, "Is that a verb?" He lives in Florida. He said, "Is winter a verb?"
Yes.
And I said, "For me, yes." And he said, "A lot of people down here in Florida say that they're wintering here." He said, "I've never thought of winter as being a verb before." I said, "Well, for some of us, it definitely is. And I am definitely wintering in Arizona. So a couple more months, we will be back there."
We'll be happy to have you. Awesome. Yes, it is a verb, and I like it. And I like the fact that we don't actually have winter here. So, of course, people want to winter here.
Yes,
we're close enough to visit places in the northern part of Arizona that get snow and go skiing and all that, and then you drive back down into the valley and you don't have to deal with any of the snow. It is perfection.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I've always said that area was the perfect, because a couple of hours you can be at a really sunny beach, and a couple of hours the other direction you could be snow skiing, and hike in the desert in the other way. So perfect location.
Challenge accepted. Now I want to go water skiing and snow skiing in the same day, because I can.
You can. Your your legs, you would be very, very tired if you did both of those in one day. Maybe one week. Maybe.
Or a weekend or something. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Anywho, we'll transition into what we're here to talk about, I suppose. Although I think it's much more fascinating to hear the going-ons of Sarah, traveling the country. But today we want to talk to you guys about the 6 numbers we think you need to know. And I want to thank you, Sarah, for bringing this topic to light, because I think it's a fun way to just be really real about some of the things you should just know. You should just know some of those numbers that are really important, and they should just be kind of top of mind. You should know what they are. So I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into these different things.
Yes, and I'll be honest, Nino, that if my husband and I didn't know these numbers and haven't been keeping track of them, we would not be able to be in our early 40s and being full-time RVers. I'm convinced that we wouldn't be in this lifestyle and have the opportunity to do this now if we didn't have these 6 numbers and keep track of them for the past several years, right? These are numbers that I believe are really important that all of us should know, no matter where we're at in our journey. But just knowing them once doesn't mean that you forget about them. It's keeping track of them, right? Always knowing what these numbers are and how they apply to your goals and your life and your dreams and your visions going forward.
Yeah, you just said something there that kind of struck me as well. Like, regardless of where you are on your journey, you should know these numbers. But sometimes you're at the beginning of your journey, and knowing these numbers might be scary, or just, I'm a firm believer that we drum things up to be way worse in our head than what they actually are. And so often when I'm sitting down with a client and we're reviewing some of the numbers we're going to be talking about today, it's really scary to think about, like, I'm going to get a little ahead of myself, but like, what is my total debt? Like, I don't want to think about that. I can tell you, I thought about like how transparent I want to be on this particular episode, because I'm like, I know this number, but this number includes the house. So many times you hear about like, all your debt except the mortgage. My number is $221,000 total debt. $221,000. It's a big, scary number. But then when I think about how like most of that's just the house, and how I have very little consumer debt left, then I'm like, okay. But anyway, like I said, I got ahead of myself. I didn't mean to like start going down that. But these are some numbers you should know and be familiar with. And to your other point, things you should be checking in on, or because if you're really managing your money well, you're looking at it pretty frequently. You're probably looking at it every pay period. So every 2 weeks, if you're paid biweekly, every month, if you're paid monthly, whatever. But when you're looking at it, you should be updating these numbers and have a good sense of where you stand in each of these categories. So, what's the first one?
Ooh, first one. What we talk about a lot here, your monthly living expenses. What does it take to run your home? What are your monthly living expenses? And I find, Nino, I'm sure you do too, I lived it for a long time where I had no idea. It just always felt paycheck to paycheck. I knew how much I was making. I knew what my paychecks were, but I wasn't necessarily keeping track of what my living expenses were, and I didn't necessarily know what that number was. It just felt like money comes in and all of it goes out, and there's way more month left over and no money.
Yeah, we do talk about that one a lot around here, don't we? Monthly living expenses. I don't know. Maybe you should have something called a budget, and maybe that budget should be the plan that you have for your money. And this is that first part that when I'm sitting down with a client for the first time, even doing something like writing out the budget and kind of putting all the expenses down on paper feels intimidating or overwhelming or scary, because to your point, what if I don't make enough money? Like, there's more bills than there is income. And so there's more month than there is money, and all of those fun things that we say, but it can be a scary moment. Fortunately, for most of my clients, when we're kind of building out that first budget and we're really kind of focused in on, like, not necessarily what things might actually be, but like what they want them to be. Like, if they want to build a little bit of a boundary around like grocery shopping, let's say. Like, I want to plan for it. And we have a discussion about, okay, well, what have you been doing and how much and how many family members and all this stuff. And then we come up with a number. But once we do that exercise and we put it all down on paper, it's usually not nearly as scary as somebody originally thought in their head.
I agree with that so much. And I just got off of a first session with some new clients, and, they very much felt like living paycheck to paycheck, overdrafting in their account a lot. And, when we started going through the numbers, putting some numbers down on a piece of paper, right, and started really looking at, okay, what do we think we're doing here? They had, and I'm going to say, and this is a relative term, but I'm going to say quite a bit left over. So really quite a bit of money that they should be having, and I'm going to use air quotes around should because I don't necessarily like that word should, but if they were actually spending what they think they were spending, there was more than enough money to do some things and not feel stressed out about, right? That there's a lot of discretionary funds there. But because they didn't know their monthly living expenses, they have no idea what those are. They are very much living paycheck to paycheck. And when we got off the session, they both said, I actually feel so much better. We didn't make any determinations about anything. We didn't make any no suggestions, no changes, no nothing. It was simply the act of looking at it head on. What are we spending each month, and what are we bringing in, right? What does it take to run our household? And just seeing them say, wow, I actually feel a lot better now. It's priceless, right? And that's all due to just having the information.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, in effort to be just kind of transparent about, how seriously we take this topic, I know that this is something that, because I'm essentially self-employed, right? And I have to kind of figure out what I'm going to pay myself every month. This was an activity that I have to do, pretty frequently. I think I've got it down to about once. I need to do it once a year. I do it twice a year just to kind of make sure that things haven't gone completely sideways. But considering the fluctuation that can happen throughout a month, like car registration is due this month, but it's not due every month. It takes anywhere between $4,200 and $4,500 a month to run the villa household. And so, I pay myself more than that so that I can accomplish other financial goals with the surplus, but knowing that, it takes $4,200 to $4,500. And one of the things I love about knowing that is then I can ask myself, am I okay with that? Because I'll tell you, like, there's plenty of that monthly living expenses that are tied up in things like, streaming services. I don't need that streaming service. So if I ever looked at that number and said, whoa, I'm not comfortable with $4,200 a month, well, then I can start to take a look at what do I want to cut back on? Where can I, find some savings? And if I'm okay with that, well, then all the better. I can move forward confidently.
Right. And I love that. I love that you do that because it puts the control back into your hands, right? It puts the choices and the decisions right back at the forefront of looking at it, saying, okay, I'm not okay with this. Where can I make some adjustments, right? And what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish here? And, very similarly, because I am self-employed as well, I do have the ability to pay myself once a month. I do pay myself twice a month because that's what works for us. That's what I, feel comfortable with. Our expenses are in between about $2,800 and $3,200 a month. That's what we try to keep it at. But one thing that I've learned is being on the road, I almost can't plan for what next month is going to cost in some areas because I don't know what rent is going to be at the different RV parks, right? And are we staying for one day? Are we staying for a week? Are we staying for a month? So it takes a lot of planning. And those fees vary widely It's a huge range of what we can pay. And so we spend, quite honestly, my husband does it, spends a lot of time calling different parks and doing our reservations because, we could be, and I'm gonna say this, and this might be very bold to say, but I'm gonna say that we could be irresponsible and we could not care, and we could pull out of our savings account to just stay at wherever, just book it and say, doesn't matter if it falls in our budget or not. But that's not who we are. We, knowing that we want to do this for a while, knowing who I am, how I talk about money, how I feel about money, my relationship with money, we are very cautious and conscientious about where we're spending it and how we're spending it and what is our budget, right? What are we trying to live with? Because we've got goals, and our goals are to travel. So, about 28 to 32.
Yeah.
Pretty close to what it takes to run our house on wheels.
Well, and what I love about that too is, first of all, I want to point out, notice we both gave a range. Right, because it's not like when we say know your monthly living expenses, it's not like it's $4,238. It's like a range is fine, but have a reasonable range because again, sometimes you're going to have months where there are other expenses that don't normally show up in every single month or whatever. Or if you live in Arizona, your electric bill during the winter months not nearly what it is in the summer months. And so there's fluctuation there. Anyway, what I love about what you said is by kind of having the range and knowing what those operating, those monthly living expenses, operating expenses, the business side of me just came out, the operating expenses are each month, it allows you to be intentional in your planning when you are going to the next place, right? To your point, you're not going to be irresponsible and just book whatever, but you're going to hunt a little bit and you're going to find we know this is the general area we want to stay, but let's contact all of these surrounding places. Let's find that best deal or whatever the case may be. But by having some boundaries and some parameters, it helps you to plan better. And that, I say it all the time. All I want you to do is have a plan. I want you to have a plan when you travel. I want you to have a plan when you're trying to pay your bills monthly. I just want you to have a plan because when you have a plan and then all you have to do is go execute it, boy, does the stress level go way, way, way down because you already pre-planned it.
Well, and and I'm just going to add in one other thing with this too, is that I hear a lot of times people say, well, I don't know what it's going to look like, or I don't know what it's going to be. Here's the thing. You know what? Let me raise my hand. I have no idea where we're going next month, right? Like if I'm not this lifestyle, we jumped into this and we did as much research as we could ahead of time, but we've talked to people that are full-time RVers that book their spots out a year in advance. We are planning that come October. We're going to start booking next year because we are finding it increasingly more difficult to find places to stay. So we don't have as many options. But, what I love when you said about, just having a plan, and even if you're not 100% sure on the exact number, right? Giving yourself a range, what you feel comfortable with, what your budget can handle, right? What you can handle without causing additional stress or an additional anxiety. What can your budget handle? What are you comfortable with? That's what we've done. And we know that we try and keep our monthly rent under $1,000. Now, we've been pretty good at staying, I would say, well under that. But coming from somebody who is, I don't have set rent. I don't have set utilities each month, right? Like even that little bit of fluctuation. I don't live that way anymore, right? So I can't even count on budget billing with my utility companies.
Right.
Right. And so I'm just sharing this with all of the listeners to say that you can do this very successfully and still not know what next month might look like. And that's because, to your point, we've set those boundaries, we've set those parameters of what we're willing to do.
Yeah.
And then we make it happen, right? And then you make it happen.
Absolutely. I've worked with clients who, have means, And because they have means, one month really fluctuates from another. And even for them, if they felt like they were living paycheck to paycheck because there wasn't a plan and it was kind of all over the place. And so being able to just kind of map some of that out and kind of normalize some of that that fluctuation, it just brings peace, brings a little bit of peace and predictability. And I think those things are important when it comes to managing money. Peace and predictability, two things that I think everybody would be like, I'll take that.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we could talk about planning and budgeting and monthly expenses all day, but let's kind of get into some of these other ones. So that was the first number you need to know, is that monthly living expense. The second you suggest that we need to know is our bank account balances. Tell me a little bit about why that's important.
How many times have you talked to somebody and you ask them, what's in your checking account right now? How much do you have in your savings account? And you just get kind of the stare of like, I have no idea. I find that so many people, they don't know what their checking account balance is, what their savings account balance is, what, if you're saving some other short-term savings goals. I find that so many people don't know these balances. And when you don't know them, it makes it very difficult to follow your plan because you don't know what your bank account balances is. So you don't know whether I can pay my rent today or my mortgage is due next week. Do I have enough in my account? It puts us in a very reactive state. We have to check our bank account just to see how much money is in there every day before we do something. And that creates a lot of anxiety. You're living very reactively, and that creates a lot of nervous system overdrive. It puts us into this state of our nervous system doesn't know how to handle things. And so just knowing your bank account balances. Now, a lot of people, and maybe you can, and I know you will, chime in, but I don't necessarily believe that we need to check our bank account, 40 times a day, right? And I think that a lot of people do because they don't know their balance. But knowing it, I check it to make sure that no funny business is going on. Nobody's gotten my bank card, so I do check it a couple of times a week. But I know what my account balance is because I know what my plan is. I know what my budget shows, and I know what bills have been paid because I've done my tracking.
Yeah, I will weigh in on that because when it comes to something like the Peace of Mind Fund or if you have an opportunity fund, it might be easy to know what those balances are because you kind of maybe set a goal and maybe you've achieved that goal. One of the things that we teach at New Money Habits is that you should have 25% of your monthly income in a Peace of Mind fund, or more commonly referred to as an emergency fund. So that would be $2,500. So you might be like, yeah, I know I have $2,500 in my Peace of Mind fund. I know that my opportunity fund has been growing and maybe that's around $3,000. And so it might be really easy to know those things. But to your point, even when somebody first kind of starts their new money habits and they're creating a plan, they're creating a budget, one thing that seems to be a lost art in this country anyway is the checkbook reconciliation process, where you know what your checking balance is because, one, you created a plan, two, you executed against that plan, and so you know things like, yes, maybe the balance when I go online says I have $3,000. But I also know that the mortgage check hasn't cleared yet, and I know that my car insurance payment hasn't cleared yet. And so, yes, it says I have $3,000, but I know better. I know that once those expenses are deducted, I truly have more of like a balance around $1,200 or whatever those numbers are. But I feel like that's what, when I come across clients who can't tell me what is in their bank account, it's not that they can't tell me how much they have. It's that they haven't done this process of like really mindfully thinking through, that's how much is in there, but I have an auto debit for my car insurance coming up. I have a scheduled payment for my mortgage scheduled. And I don't know, maybe you still write a check to the water company, and so that's outstanding. And so knowing your bank balance for me is about, well, do you really know how much actual money, spendable money you have? And so, yeah.
Do people still write checks? We don't have checkbook registers because people don't write checks, and they have these fancy little, like, little like business card size cards now that we just like tap on a thing, or heck, I think most people, don't they just use their phones now and they tap? I don't do that, but I'm just giving you a hard time. I think because we've gone into this more digital world that people don't keep track, and they don't balance their checkbooks like they used to, right? I don't think people are really reconciling their accounts. So I love that you brought that up, because a lot of people are not doing that.
And what's interesting is because when I sit down with a new client and they're just starting this journey, we have to take things a little, step by step, a little bit at a time. You can't bite off, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I always like to focus on the budget first. Let's get the plan in place, and then let's go execute against that plan. But it's not until I've been meeting with somebody for a little while, and that's usually maybe 3 to 4 pay periods. So if somebody's paid biweekly, I've met with them for 2 months. If they're paid monthly, it's been 4 months. But I wait until 3 or 4, like you're getting used to the budget, used to executing it, that I then introduce the whole, like, you need to balance your checkbook idea. And now that you went and executed it, because to your point, the other thing I want to be looking for is when I'm reconciling my checking account, I'm looking for, was I charged multiple times for something? And that literally happened but like 3 months ago. It doesn't happen all that often anymore, but the transportation company at my children's school charged me 3 times on the same day, $31, $31. And I'm like, see, if I don't pay attention to these things, I'd be out $62, right? Because I only owed them 31. They now owe me 62. And it's $62. And to some people, that's a lot of money. And to some people, it's like, it's not even worth the headache to try to fix it. For me, it was worth the headache to try to fix it. I had to call them and let them know, like, look, you charged me 3 times. So I want to be in there, and I want to be reconciling so that I can validate, like, yeah, those were my purchases, and I'm not being overcharged, or somebody didn't, heaven forbid, somebody got my, information, that sort of thing. Important.
Right. And I think this goes along with, which isn't necessarily a number, I think it could fall in here, but, I talk a lot about tracking and just knowing where your dollars are going. And so knowing what your account balances are and where those dollars are going, you can then, and this is why it's important, I just lost the word that I was going to use, but you're comparing it. What did I plan? What did I want to have happen this month? And what did I actually do? And so these numbers, they're all very much intertwined. And that's why they're all so very important, right? That it's not just, if I know this, everything's going to be fine. It's the whole gamut of them and how they're all intertwined that makes your money journey easier to handle and easier to follow, is because each of these pieces it's a critical piece of your journey.
Yeah. I've never been a fan of like a budget worksheet that has like a column for budgeted and then right next to it, the column for actual. But even though I've never liked that format, to your point, I've always used the bank reconciliation sheet, that checkbook, to do that exact thing. This is what was planned. This is what was executed. And I mean, at this point, I think it's been 3 years since those numbers didn't match. I mean, those numbers always match because, I've redefined things like emergencies, which is a totally different topic for another day. But, even emergencies just can't creep up on you and throw you off, once you're managing your money that way.
Right. So true.
Very cool. All right. Well, so 2 down, 4 to go. I kind of teased this one earlier, and I cannot believe how badly I misspoke, but I'll address that in a second. But the third number you need to know is your total debt number. And so I totally misspoke when I gave my total debt number. I don't know how. I know how I did it. I think it was like the sensationalism of where I started, right? The 200 started at $221,000. That is not the debt number anymore. Thank goodness. But anyway.
Well, total debt. Very simply, the reason why I believe you need to know this number is because you need to know where you're starting from, right? Just what am I looking? You can't put together a good plan if you don't know how much debt you have. And listen, I don't believe that all debt is bad debt, right? I don't think, there are some debts that can be productive debt. You can have debt that can be asset, it's an income producing, multiple real estate properties, that kind of thing. But knowing what that looks like, knowing where you're at, allows you to be able to create a plan so you can be reaching goals. What is it that you want to have happen? I find for many people, consumer debt is very overwhelming, and it feels like they're suffocating, they're being buried alive, but they don't really know how much debt they have. It feels like a lot, but they don't actually know the numbers. So, and to your earlier point, Nino, that when you actually look at your debt, right, and you get that total number down, I find that people have made it worse. We've kind of made this worse in our head, right? That it feels like it's this huge, great number. And while sometimes, that huge, great numbers, it's all relative. But I think, and I'm the queen of this, making things worse than they really are. And when you've swept that number, or kind of refused to look at it for so long, it kind of grows. And I think it's like that thing, it keeps creeping in, it keeps creeping in, it keeps creeping in because you don't know what it looks like. And that's the scary part. It's not the actual number. It's that you've kind of let it creep and sit to the sidelines for so long. So, knowing your total debt, I think is just critical.
Yeah. And this is one of those areas that when I'm sitting down with the client for the first time, to your point, just like the budget and the expenses, we start to look at the debt separately, together but separate, and it's like, hey, let's just list it out. And of course, like we're listing out the total, like the total payoff balance. We're listing out the monthly, the minimum monthly payments on that, and all of that. And it can be really intimidating or overwhelming. Earlier you said you don't think all debt is bad debt, and there's truth in that. And that's why some debt should be handled differently. And we did an episode not too long ago where we talked about paying off debt in phases and kind of attacking debt in a different manner. So if you didn't catch that episode, I encourage you as a listener to go back and find our episode on eliminating debt in phases. So knowing your number is like having a map to help you to understand where it is you're trying to go. By being able to put that number down, know what your total debt is, you can then map out, well, how am I going to start to eliminate some or all of this debt? So it can be scary, but it's usually worse in our head than what it is on paper. And even when you get it down on paper and it's at and even when you get it down on paper and it is as scary as $221,000 or whatever your number is, understanding that you're going to eliminate some of that in phases, and that just helps you to map out what those phases should be, should again bring a little bit of peace to an otherwise unsettling situation.
Absolutely. So do you want to, I don't want to say correct, but do you want to update your number since maybe you said you misspoke about I'm curious, do you want to update that?
Yeah, so that was when I kind of started things in 2013. The number is down to 152, but that might sound like it's still kind of high. Like, why is it still so high? Well, first of all, a lot of that is the house. The second part of that is, as we've said, not all debt is bad. So I have taken out home equity line of credit to update the house. And so I have gone, I got out of debt. I went back into it a little bit. And so the number's still kind of high, but it's not 211 or 221. No. And I can't even keep the number straight. So much for knowing your number, Nino.
Right. This is why we should know, right? This is prime example.
Yep.
But I think the important part too to mention with a lot of this is that you said it there that you kind of went back in and in and out in different areas, and I certainly have shared that in some of our episodes too. But knowing that you're feeling good about what it is that you're doing, right? That you are following your plan, and it's about owning those choices, which I think is important. And again, the amount is all relative. For some people, 121,000 might be a lot, and for others, it might not be anything at all, right? It's all relative, and it's more important about how you feel about it. And I always like to look at how far have we come, right? Mm-hmm. What have I learned in this process? What things have we been able to get off the plate, right? That our plan started out this way, and we've been able to get way past this and make so much progress that we just feel good about our situation now. So,
yep.
And that's something to be celebrated. Not necessarily what the amount is, but really the lessons that you've learned, the strides that have been made, the progress that the things that you've been able to accomplish.
And
huge.
And to that end about like the lessons that have been learned or whatever. So like, while I was willing to go back into debt for something like putting in a backyard or remodeling the first story of our house, along this journey, I have cash flowed the replacement of an air conditioning unit. I've cash flowed like car repairs. And so while I made a conscientious decision to go back into debt for certain things, I'm also making a very informed, intentional decision about not going into debt for certain other things. So it's not like all or nothing. It's, kind of pick your spots.
Mm-hmm. And I love that too, because, while James and I, my husband and I, we do not have any debt anymore. We made a very conscious decision to pay cash for our fifth wheel, right? Knowing that could we have made payments on it? We could have. So we then would have kept more cash in the bank for, who knows what, for purchasing a home or something. But we chose to just pay cash for this, knowing that we were going to be living in it. And that's what felt good to us at the time, right? But we went through both scenarios. Like, what are we comfortable with? Where do we want to spend this money? And it's about knowing, and this is not necessarily it's an asset that we can sell, but it's not appreciating in value.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just something that we had to work through, and knowing our numbers, knowing again what our goals were, it allowed us to be able to make a better decision and be more conscious with the decisions that we were making. So know your numbers.
No. All right. Another great one, another good, important number to know. And it's funny because when you brought this up, Sarah, I don't know that I was thinking I needed to know this number. I know what the number is. So I was happy, like, when you brought it up that I knew it. But it wasn't something I was giving a whole lot of thought about, like, I better keep this front of mind. And that is yearly medical deductible and out-of-pocket expenses. like I said, I did know the number when you brought it up, but it got me thinking, wow, it's not something that I slow down long enough with some of my clients to say, hey, do we know what those numbers are? Because I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, part of the thinking there is you better know these numbers in case you have these medical deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses come up. It's probably going to inform something like how much money you have in your peace of mind fund in case you needed to cover that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's absolutely the case. And, a lot of people, and I have myself been in the situation with a lot of medical debt. Things pile on. And I've shared some of our, journey on the podcast here. But for those that maybe didn't catch the episodes, 12 years ago, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We had, I will call it, decent health insurance. And I did know, some of the numbers, right? I did know what our regular doctor's office copays of $20. I did know that. We didn't really take medication, so I wasn't 100% sure on what that cost, because that's not something that affected us very much. I had several surgeries before that, so I kind of knew our out-of-pocket max and what that looked like. But some of the other things that I didn't pay attention to before that period of time was, is it per person? Is it, what does a family look like? Because up until that point, it was really just me. And that's the only number that I focused on. I'll be real honest, right? What does an ER visit oftentimes is different than a regular doctor's office visit copay. And those are funds. Those are dollars that you have to pay right away. There's no making payments on those types of things, right? And so I've seen a lot of clients that say, hey, I had to go to the ER and we had x-rays, and, while some of that can be paid over time, some of it cannot, right? And they had to put that $250 ER visit on a credit card because they didn't know what that expense was, and it shook them. They're like, hey, when you're already going through a stressful situation. Yearly out-of-pocket max, and this number, guys, this is information that you should know because something will always happen. We don't know what it's going to be, but something will happen. And medical is one of those things that it catches people. And, I think we're going to probably do a whole episode on medical. And, we've got some pretty strong opinions. I think we brought it up a couple of times in the past, but medical is one of those things that oftentimes it hits us. We're not necessarily expecting it. It's very costly, and it puts a lot of us into a lot of medical debt. It causes disruptions to our budgets, our life. It certainly did with my son. And I'll tell you, I just had a conversation with him the other night, as a young kid. He said, Mom, I went and got, had to have blood work. Quarterly doctor's visit with his endocrinologist. He pays $80 a month for some medical equipment that is not covered under insurance, and that's the best. Everything that $80 a month for somebody that's really living paycheck to paycheck, that's a lot, but he needs it to live. No option, right? He said, Mom, I was looking at the bill for the blood work. He said, it's $500 for one vial of blood. I said, I know, buddy, isn't it nuts? It's nuts. And I don't want to get off on the medical, but my point in this is knowing what your numbers are. Knowing, because I've talked with him about this a lot. These are numbers that he has to know if he doesn't want to go into debt and have to put a prescription on a credit card, right? How do I budget these, these sensors in? How do I budget my insulin in? They're critical numbers. And I find that out of probably all of these, this is one that people, when I ask them, and I do ask all of my clients, it takes them a while to find the answer.
Yeah, I would imagine. I would imagine it takes them a little bit of time to, find it, whether that's going through paperwork from work or whatever. But it also got me thinking about how, as I alluded to, as we started talking about your annual medical deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses, it's going to inform what your peace of mind fund should be. And we talk about a peace of mind fund being similar to that of an emergency fund, but instead of talking about emergencies and kind of bringing that energy to us, it's more about what do we want? Well, we want peace of mind. And wouldn't it be nice to know that if you're going to hit your, I feel very blessed and fortunate that the type of insurance that we have, our family and I, it's a household